Start the recording. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Otts. I'm the director of the National Sea Grant Law Center. Thank you so much for joining us today for our quarterly all hands call for the Sea Grant Water Resources team. And I'm going to be turning over the meeting to Karen here in a minute, but just wanted to welcome everyone and thanks for joining us. Right. So Karen, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Steph. So we have just a few things, a few updates, and then we really want to turn the agenda over to some discussion items for most of the meeting today. So like I said, just a couple of updates, then we'll have some people chiming in with some opportunities for us to kind of consider before we jump into a discussion on where we want to focus this team's efforts over the next 2 years.
Oh,
Steph, can you?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So one thing I forgot to mention, so we do record these so that we can share them with team members who aren't able to join us, and we leave the polling questions kind of open for to contribute. So if you have any of your colleagues that can't join us today, we will be sending information out with a recording and a way to participate in the polls after the call.
Most definitely. And as Steph said earlier, if there's anything that you might not be able to get to the polling or those sorts of things, please enter things into the chat and we'll record them as well that way. First of all, we wanted to just give an appreciation and an awareness of the Water Resources Leadership Team. These people have been fundamental in the leadership, not only in the development of the Water Resources Vision, but also in our ongoing efforts to implement the visions, that vision, the priorities and goals set forth therein. Next. So the first big announcement that we wanted to actually share with everyone is the fact that the national office has made it possible to hire me actually as the Sea Grant Water Resources lead through Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant Consortium. I'm going to be working on as the lead for water resources for the next 2 years as a part of a scoping project for the network. The goal of that project is to develop a roadmap for Sea Grant Water Resources initiatives, which will improve communication and coordination within the Sea Grant network and among key partners. If you would like to read that position announcement and learn a little bit more, we'll go ahead and put that in the link to that in the chat as well. Next. So what's the purpose of this project? And really it goes back to the national office funded our visioning efforts back in 2018. And they really saw that as a starting point for the network. And they were hoping that over the long term, we would develop some topical groups with network-wide representation. And that these groups or teams would work together to communicate and collaborate to actually meet the priorities and the goals of the different visions that were developed back in 2018. So in essence, this project that I'm working on now is what the national office has provided as an opportunity to really start to fund some of these efforts and empower the Sea Grant network to revisit the priorities that were laid forth in the water resources vision and really chart our future as to where we want to go with water resources over the next decade plus across the network. Next. There's really 3 main goals within the project over the next 2 years. The first is to actually provide leadership and engagement to increase communication and coordination across the Sea Grant network on water resources. The second is specifically a scoping process that will help to determine and better understand the water resources related efforts, needs, and priorities across our network. So all the different Sea Grant programs, the functional areas, the regions, everyone involved. And then last, once we kind of understand what those needs and priorities are and the things that we're currently doing, it'll be looking at trying to go outside of Sea Grant and understanding what some of our key water resources resources partners and figure out how we might best coordinate some of those efforts with them as well. Next. So if you have any questions about that particular project, please let us know. Put them in the chat. I'll try to address those, or please feel free to send me an email at any point in time. The second update we wanted to provide for you guys was about the Green Infrastructure webinar that we hosted back on September 14th. Now, this webinar was actually the third in our series for this year. If you'll recall, we had a webinar on COVID back in January, and then we had the Contaminants of Emerging Concern webinar in May. We had 91 participants, so we had a really great participation in September, and we had representation from 25 of our Sea Grant programs and the national office. Now, we've also provided, and I will add these in the chat as well, that we have a recording. You can go back and watch the recording of the webinar if you're interested. And then we also have a webinar summary that's online as well, if you'd like to take a look at that. That actually has all the slides as well as the Q&A and some of those other features in it as well. Next. We had a number of presenters and panelists that were a part of this webinar. We had Lauren Long from Office for Coastal Management, Jess Brown from our Georgia program. Both did feature-length presentations about green infrastructure. And then we had John Bellata, Peter Rowe, and Kelly Donaldson that all served as panelists, talking about different opportunities that they've had and ways that we can, other ways that we might want to look at green infrastructure and opportunities for work in that area. Next. Just a little bit of summary on some of the things that the feedback that we got back. We always do an evaluation, and what you'll see here, one of the top questions is how would you rate the content and the presentation of the webinar topic? And as you can see, we got very positive results here. And on the next slide is the summary that we got about whether this might provide some interest in engaging in additional Sea Grants across Sea Grant programs and the wider Water Resources Sea Grant network. And again, we got a lot of really positive responses here. Now, if you will just remind everyone that these webinars are actually targeted inside of Sea Grant, so actually Sea Grant employees from any of the different programs, our advisory committees, those sorts of things. It was interesting. We had, I believe it was over 20 people that were not actually within the Sea Grant network that were participated in this webinar. So that might actually indicate some of the pieces that where there might not be increased in collaboration across the Sea Grant network, but I think that it's very positive to look at what we are seeing here. And next slide. So as we look into the future, we're looking at possibly holding one more webinar yet this year. If it doesn't happen this year, it will happen the first part of next year, and maybe January, February of 2022. We've talked to you all in the past about actually having a webinar to have the different national office funding awardees come in and talk about their work and where they plan to go with their projects. We've also talked about having the new Sea Grant liaisons come out and talk to us about their efforts. So we just wanted to put this poll out and ask you all which one you might prefer to hear from first. Please take a second to go ahead and to answer this poll. We will go ahead and put the link back in the chat again for if there's any newcomers. Please know that whichever group ends up going first doesn't mean we won't host the second. We'll probably just have them either in another webinar in the future or maybe on a different all hands call or something along those lines. So we'll still hear from them. This just will help us to kind of prioritize as to which one we want to host first.
And Karen, just to add, in case some of the folks on the call don't know, so there was that the Liaison competition happened a couple years ago. They were just recently announced, but there were a few that we thought were particularly relevant to the water resources team. There is a new HABS liaison with Florida Sea Grant. There, and I might get the titles wrong, but I think there's a community science one with Louisiana Sea Grant. Georgia Sea Grant has a new liaison with the Department of Defense that I think is related to climate. So it would just be an opportunity for some of the new liaisons with some connection to water resources to share.
Most definitely. And I think we have Michelle Covey, who's the Georgia liaison, has actually been on the call today. So she's already jumping in, and Betty from Florida has joined us a lot in the past as well. So
great. So it looks like the poll has stopped moving a little bit. So I don't know, Karen, if you need a screenshot, but we can move on.
Yes, let me. We'll go ahead without it. I think we've got what we need.
Okay. Thanks. Great. So thanks everyone for participating in the poll and engaging.
Definitely. Okay. We also just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up. We've talked about this in the past. We do intend to keep up with the webinars in 2022. And two of the top topics that y'all have voted on in the past to potentially have webinars on are water resilience and water equity. So if you have any interest in helping to plan those webinars, please send us an email or put your name in the chat. You can send that to Steph or myself, either one, or like I said, put it in the chat now. We would not be able to have these webinars if it were not for the planning committees that help us to make it possible. And those committees really have a lot of say in how we end up prioritizing and the topics that we cover. So it's a really great opportunity to step up and take a bit of a leadership role across the network. So please let us know if you'd like to help us out with either or both of these topics next year. And we can move forward again. So now that we've kind of gotten our updates out of the way, we want to kind of focus us in and hear from some of you and kind of start thinking about priorities for this particular group over, again, the next couple of years, but also keeping the next, 5-10 years kind of in our horizon as well. From our perspective, we've completed the Sea Grant Water Resources vision that was complete back in 2018, and this group has continued to meet and has expanded over time as we really worked towards implementing that vision. And I just want to remind everyone that from the national office perspective, they really have a focus and they really want to see these groups that bring in representation from across the network that help to communicate and collaborate to meet the priorities and the goals of these visions. And so that's really what I see us doing is communicating, collaborating to meet the priorities and the goals of the water resources vision. But we want to really utilize this group and my new position and make sure that we're focusing our efforts to best serve the network as we look into our immediate needs, and then again, those needs over the next, several, the next decade or so. So we kind of want to talk to you all and think about how do we best work together and what do we want our priorities to be as we are moving forward. And to that end, let's go to the next slide. I think it's always a really great reminder. We have quite a few of our members who were very active in the development of the water resources vision, but we've also been really lucky to capture some new people along the way. And so we wanted to go back and kind of help to define water resources. And, it seems like it's a very common sense, well, it is X or Y, but we really worked to create a common vision and a common definition, if you will, of water resources back when we developed the vision. That vision had input from across the network. And to that end, we ended up having collected a lot of data. We ended up having over 56 discrete topics that were included in water resources. We had a team that actually came in and organized those within 4 specific themes. And let's just dive a little bit deeper into each of these themes so we kind of get a better look at what exactly water resources is. This first theme was environment and human health. And really the target here was understanding, preventing, and mitigating the effects of impaired water quality to protect human health, communities, and ecosystems. And what you see in the bulleted list below that are discrete topics that were included within this particular theme. And I just want to also note that on the left-hand side, and as part of the picture, we've kind of captured the different focus areas from the national program that are really captured within these different discrete topics and the overall theme. The next theme is actually water infrastructure, which is really trying to get at the functions, vulnerabilities, and costs associated with water storage, transport, and treatment to develop and maintain sustainable water infrastructure. And again, there's a variety of discrete topics that we traditionally work on within the Sea Grant, or have been working on within the Sea Grant network, having to do with water infrastructure. Our next theme is land management, restoration, and development, which is getting at this relationship between land use and water quality, and exploring land management practices and opportunities that improve water resources and promote social, economic, and ecological resilience. And that resilience word is really important. It's a big word right now, and it's a huge topic, but yes, it is included within water resources. And there's a lot of ways that we're actually doing this across the network already, and I'm sure we will continue to in the future. And then our last theme within water resources is this idea of water planning and socioeconomics, and really understanding policy and planning choices, as well as the socioeconomic drivers affecting the use and importance of water resources. And this has a lot to do with human dimensions, with policies. We get into our equity and justice issues within this particular theme, competing uses, as well as a lot of economic topics too. So there's really, next slide. When you think about from a big picture perspective, basically everything, almost everything we do within Sea Grant is captured within this water resources topic. And so it really touches so much of what we do, and it's really important. And trying to figure out how we prioritize and tackle this is really important. So to that end, we'll move forward. And what we wanted to do is to actually hear from a few of people that are on this team and have been working with us over the past, some of them have been working with us since the development of the actual vision, but just kind of get a better idea of some potential opportunities that are out there right now. It may be opportunities for engagement, or there might be specific projects and those sorts of things. And I just want to note that we're going to call on some people to talk today, but we also want to reserve some time to open this up broader to anyone else that wants to add in to the discussion. So to start things off, I know that Sylvain from Connecticut had a conflict, but Sylvain, have you been able to join us yet? Okay, it doesn't look like it. So
it just joined. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Sylvain, if you need a minute, we can jump off to, we can check with Peter and come back to you if you prefer.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, Sylvain, I know you wanted to tell us a little bit more about your project and talk to us, I think, a bit about how we might engage with you. So I will turn the table over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to report that Connecticut, North Carolina, and New Hampshire Sea Grants programs were leading the proposal that got selected for funding as part of the Contaminants of Emerging Concern competition. I just wanted to say a couple words about process. We are going to do a short literature review and draft a survey to understand what Sea Grant and partners do and think is of higher importance for Sea Grant as a role to play in the field of emerging contaminants. And the survey is going to include questions that relate to topics, to functions of Sea Grant, and so on. And at this point, I'd like to make sure that we have it's going to be a national survey, that we have a good participation from the network and from partners outside of the network that are relevant to contaminants of emerging concern. And we're also going to host regional virtual workshops where we want to bring a handful of participants that are relevant to the region, whether they be federal, state agencies, NGOs, academic leaders, and we have selected people that will help us host those virtual workshops. But again, input is welcome in trying to identify the people that would be most relevant to that discussion on a regional scale, to understand if there are regional differences in attitude and understanding of contaminants of emerging concern. And within the first 6 months, we're tasked to have a white paper that will draft a path for a role for Sea Grant to play in contaminants of emerging concern. And then we're going to host a 2-year regional research competition. Does that align with what you expected, Karen?
I think that's great, Sylvain. Thank you very much. We just wanted to, make sure that everybody was aware of kind of what your plans are, and it sounds like maybe an ask of the group in the future is going to be to help to engage in some of these workshops and provide feedback as appropriate when those opportunities come up. Is that fair?
Yeah, and also help disseminate the national survey that's going to be going to Sea Grant programs, but also to outside of Sea Grant, to understand what others do and what Sea Grant sees as a role for itself, but what others see as a role for Sea Grant in that field.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Sylvain. That's great. And just wanted to let everybody know that we've asked everyone to kind of keep these short to 2 minutes or so, because we did want to open up the floor and provide an opportunity for others to provide input too. So thank you for kicking us off, Sylvain. So next, Pete, do you want to talk about the mitigating runoff proposal that you all are starting up on now? Or project, I should say. It's no longer a proposal. Okay, and I'm actually, maybe there's a conflict with Pete as well. I'm not seeing him yet. So we'll come back to that. So we also, as we know, Pennsylvania Sea Grant was the lead in a water equity proposal that was awarded. And while they weren't ready to make any presentation or provide any additional information right at this particular time about engagement, we do want to just remind everybody that this is something that is really critical to water resources. And so we do hope that there might be opportunities for us to engage, the team to engage with them in the future as well.
And Karen, Karen, I would just add, so Sarah Stallman at Pennsylvania Sea Grant is the lead for that project. So if anyone on the call is interested in learning more, I'd encourage them to reach out to Sarah.
Thank you, Steph. That's great. And again, we will ask for all 3 of these projects to come in and give us some more additional details in a future webinar or an all hands meeting as well. So we're going to try and keep the engagement with these groups going over the next 2 years as they proceed through these projects. And Steph, can you help me kind of keep an eye out to see if Pete actually is able to jump on?
Yes, I'll watch the participant list. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and Jess, I believe you wanted to talk to us a little bit about an idea that you had as well for a think tank.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, one of the topics that has been really of interest in the Southeast region and some in the Mid-Atlantic, but wanted to go ahead and kind of extend that out through the network is having a smaller subcommittee or a think tank, a group of folks coming together to discuss ideas and potential funding opportunities around stormwater green infrastructure. And we do have a community of practice, and that John Belletta is leading a lot of that efforts, and that's re-engaging. That's a great opportunity for us to learn about projects, but the purpose of this sort of subcommittee would be specifically to seek some funding opportunities to do regional and larger national connectivity type of stormwater green infrastructure projects. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Appreciate that. And so that's another thing that we might want to think about. Maybe even trying to formalize this committee as a part of the team itself. And I think Jess maybe even said reporting out and those sorts of things. So might be a great way to connect across the network. Next, Mark Reese was going to talk to us a little bit about a great new project that was just received funding. I think it was just last week, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, well, it was announced last week, I guess. I just put the link to the press release on the project in the chat, which also has a link to the website if people need more information. But this is really a RISA grant, so it's very regionally focused on Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and the Caribbean. And essentially, we are proposing to do a couple workshops, one in Atlanta this spring and in Puerto Rico this summer, trying to summarize climate equity issues primarily related around public health, which, it's not directly related to water resources, but definitely a lot of the main public health concerns out there are sort of derived from water resource issues as well. So how can others help, or how can the team help? We really need input on who to invite to these meetings in terms of public health and climate experts, as well as potential underserved communities within those states that might be able to share their needs and concerns with the group. So I encourage y'all to go check out the website, and there's a link there where you can sign up to be more involved.
Great, thank you, Mark. And is it safe to assume that there might be some products that would come out of this that might help to inform other actions in other regions that might get at some of the same challenges?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the main product's going to be a white paper at the end of it and suggestions going forward. And who knows if the RISA will have an opportunity to get follow-up funding beyond the 1-year project, but we definitely hope that perhaps it's something that NOAA will be interested in continuing.
Great, well, thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor. Are there any other projects or things that you all are working on that might be opportunities for this particular team to engage, or maybe there are things that we might want to consider actually, putting together groups to form action on and try to engage more formally? And please feel free if there is something that you'd like to put on the floor to just unmute yourself and chat with us. We will ask that you keep things succinct, but wanted to provide this time to hear from more of you.
So Michelle, if you are on, this is an opportunity for you to tell the group a little bit about what you're doing as the DoD liaison.
Yeah, great. Let's see. Put on my what I'm working on is well, there's an opportunity right now that the program that I'm working most closely with, which is the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, has a challenge out right now that is looking for projects in military communities. So projects around bases or close to bases that that want to plan, design, and build natural infrastructure to prevent for climate resilience. So that's an open opportunity right now. And if folks want to, I'll put my email in the chat if folks are interested in that, to contact me to get more information about that. It's something that they're looking to work closely with FEMA BRIC and other programs, other federal programs, to really work together to deal with some of the flooding issues, coastal erosion, and those kinds of issues. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing with the other liaisons to make a presentation at some future meeting as well. So it's great to be a part of this group.
Thank you, Michelle, and we're certainly happy to have you on board. Is there anyone else that has any projects or opportunities that you might want to just make sure that the group's aware of? And Steph, I'm assuming that we never did catch Pete back in.
Nope, I don't think he was able to join us.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Well, then let's go ahead and move to the next slide.
But I would say if anyone is interested in the mitigating runoff project, if you missed it on Karen's previous slide, Pete did present on that during the Green Infrastructure webinar. So you could go back and watch the recording to get a little bit of very preliminary information about the project from that recording.
And the link to the recording is actually in the, we provided it in the chat earlier. So if you've been online, it's available there. It's also as a part of the summary document, which is hosted right now on this National Sea Grant Law Center's water resources page as well. So, and that link is also in the chat. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And so at this point, we'd like to actually just hear more from you guys and really talk about, as the Sea Grant Water Resources Group, where do we want to focus our efforts over the next 2 years? Obviously, we have a lot of options, but we want to kind of get down to what are some of our priorities. We have these webinars that we've been producing. We've committed to doing those again next year. We have several different opportunities through these awardees and the proposals that they're now enacting and implementing. Jess has talked to us about this think tank idea. We have several new liaisons that are coming on board. Just a lot of different things that we're already doing across the network. But we want to hear from you as to what you believe are some of the priorities that this group can really dig their teeth into and maybe move the dial on over the next couple of years. And please, we encourage you to unmute yourself and jump into the conversation.
Yeah, and similar to what was just shared, in this, if you have projects that you've been working on that you think would be a priority to maybe take a little more nationwide, or get some collaborations and across programs. Obviously, one of the priorities that Karen and I, have shared is to continue the webinar series, but I'm sure there's lots of other ideas for activities.
So this is Mark. I guess I'll throw out one for the group. I used to coordinate water resources programs for the land grant university here, and there was a big national water program that USDA NIFA ran that sort of died out probably about a decade ago. But one of the things they really did that I thought was great was had a national extension water conference, and Sea Grant participated in that several times, I believe. And I think that could be an activity we could work on. So I've heard from some people that NIFA is interested in and working toward reviving some of their water efforts with the USDA. And I wonder, reaching out to them and saying, hey, what can we cooperatively do around extension and outreach from the universities related to water resources would be a worthwhile effort.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Mark. That's certainly something that idea has come up multiple times over the last couple of years, and there does seem to be some support for it as well. So it's a really good one to add to the table.
Yeah, this is Sam. Hey, Mark. Really excellent path that you described, and I feel that having those conversations, including with NIFA, as Dave Hansen said, that regaining that, reestablishing that, will really make a lot of sense. I'm also thinking when it comes to extension and water equity, there are some stakeholders that we really haven't connected with their geographies. For example, the recent report about where the flooding, the victims from the flooding in New York City that died, they're not really were part of Sea Grant's audience or stakeholders. They were all Asians and who were living in daylight apartments. And that's some of the areas that we've never considered. So I think Water Vision also has an element to the diversity aspects, and as well as earlier with our ability to connect with other agencies and share this unique role of Sea Grant.
Thanks, Sam. That's really poignant, and I'm wondering if maybe there's not even two elements there. Connection with actual stakeholders on the ground, but then also potential connection with maybe some state agencies. I see you nodding, Sam, or you're on mute.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a federal agency. The state agencies and even the local authorities would make a lot of sense. Of course, New York City is in itself larger than some states. So
Sam. And not to cut off conversation, but if we have a lull here, I need to apologize and correct the record about who the project lead is for the water equity project. It's not Pennsylvania Sea Grant, it's actually Minnesota Sea Grant, and the contact person is Madison Rodman. So if anybody was thinking about reaching out about that project, just we wanted to make sure we were giving the right information. So thanks, Kelly Donaldson, for.
Yeah, and thanks, Stephanie. I was going to jump in and I thought Sarah was on the call today. And so I saw Pennsylvania Sea Grant, and then I didn't have a moment to correct. So I appreciate the correction. But yes, I'm the contact for that. And we're still in early days, just started up. So nothing to report, but look forward to sharing about that project more in the future with this group. But thanks for the correction. I didn't have a moment to interject. Yes.
No, thanks. And hopefully this is on the record for everyone. I get all things messed up, so never hesitate to jump in and correct me. So.
Nope, I was just waiting for Sarah to be on the call, and I was looking around and thinking maybe she'll just join any second. But yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Madison, I don't want to put you on the spot, and so feel free to say we can discuss this in future opportunities, but are you thinking there's going to be engagement opportunities for the network in the project, or we're just not there yet?
Yeah, still a little bit early to say, but we're looking forward to making a toolkit for some replicability. So we're working with Pennsylvania Sea Grant, so Minnesota Sea Grant, Pennsylvania Sea Grant, and Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant are doing kind of paired, mirrored projects across the Great Lakes Basin. And so we'll be working on a toolkit that maybe we'll seek input from you all on how to expand the effort that we're kind of working on relating to green infrastructure and flooding into your communities as well. So that would be coming out in a year or so, a bit later, for opportunities on engagement with that. But maybe there'll be some peer review time, things of that nature.
Great, thank you very much. Are there other things? I mean, we've had a couple of really good points that have been brought up. There's been, I notice in the chat, there's a few pieces here that supporting these two different ideas, reestablishing a connection with USDA and NEFA, which might include a water conference. Also, this idea of we might have some gaps in engagement with certain stakeholder groups on the ground, and may even have some opportunities to connect with some other local, state, maybe even regional governmental entities to try and get to some audiences that maybe we're not reaching yet. Other things that we've, as Steph has said, we have the webinar series and several other engagement opportunities that will be coming up across the board in the next year. But are there other things that you all know of that are things that we should consider prioritizing as group actions?
This is just my perspective, but what seems really important is what can a national network of enthusiastic specialists in water provide for a particular program or a particular region in advancing some of the action that were proposed in the water vision. Because it seems that based upon the success of the projects submitted, it's rather obvious that the projects that did not actually fully engage the water visioning team in making selections in developing their projects are the ones that were funded. So, which I think the projects that are funded are excellent projects, but at the same time, it seems that the competitive nature, at least the way that the competition is established, does not seem to necessarily give any points to this national collaboration that we have in place here. And if that's the case, that's something we should certainly begin to take a deeper look at. Or maybe because of the competitive nature of funding, we need to look at different ways of those funding models, or this group needs to look into areas where we can be more effective. Maybe you need to look at our role externally, that we represent a network of Sea Grant water professionals in connecting with other agencies, for example, with USDA and NIFA.
So Sam, is there something specific that you are suggesting within an action within the network, or maybe just again, better coordination and both within the network and
I think
beyond?
And again, this is purely my bias, okay? But we've been working for a couple of years in start-stops in reigniting the USDA and NIFA, and maybe USDA, NIFA, and EPA connections, and on a national scale. And I think this water visioning team is a really good forum for doing it. In that, obviously, we can't make decisions for state programs in the national office, but we can certainly open some doors for opportunities that can happen. And so I think that's a rich avenue where we can actually have some real impacts. If, for example, if we're developing our own webinars, why not develop a conference or webinar with NIFA at this point through our efforts, like to build on what Mark and others have suggested.
Yeah, Sam, yeah, thanks. And that could be right. I mean, I think you're identifying a really good issue that probably the group needs to think about a little more, is what type of activities, where can we be the most effective? I think after the NOFOs came out, there were many people on this call that worked and developed proposals, and some kind of came more directly from this, vision group. And like you said, those were not the ones that were, successful. And so maybe, another opportunity or a different direction could be to try to, raise the visibility of this network of professionals with some of the other agencies, and reignite some of those conversations, if that maybe seems like something that we can be more effective at.
And what I've captured, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to capture some notes in the process as well, is that, Sam, as a group, we might be able to open some doors that the national office may not be able to, and kind of thinking it more of a grassroots development of relationships versus top down. And is that kind of?
Yeah, that's very true. During my stint at the national office, one of the areas that I really wanted to do was to help the national office build those connections with, say, USDA and NIFA. And but the problem is that when you're actually in the national office, there's a lot of sensitivity on who should be interacting with whom and at what scale. And so essentially it becomes a situation of stasis, in that you need to get a series of permissions. And by the time you get to permissions, then somebody else might be assigned to that task, or other groups. And sometimes just being able to be part of the network, or representing the network of the Sea Grant College programs or a specific program on behalf of us is more effective in getting in the door and having some of those conversations that then can be shared back with the national office. And that's something that this group can do that the national office can't do as efficiently.
Thanks, Sam. And also, sorry if your hand was raised for a while and I just now saw it, but but Anna, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a list here of priorities that I want to share with you. One of them is the urban rivers, because we think that a healthy and free river is equal to a healthy and resilient ocean. Maybe urban rivers would be a good topic for the next 2 years. Another topic is the use of green infrastructure to reduce risk and build a community's resilience. The ecosystem services of the project that are trying to control flood and to promote water quality in our water environments. The use of nature-based alternative in all the infrastructure projects. For example, in Puerto Rico, we are a small island and we have too many great infrastructure. We need more green and blue-green infrastructure. Maybe green infrastructure would be a great priority for the group for the next 2 years, and how the ecosystem provides services to all of us and to promote diversity, and how the public policy, for example, in Puerto Rico, we are trying to change from obsolete projects of the U.S. Corps of Engineers to more engineering with nature projects. And the last point that I have in my list is preserve the natural environment and mimic the natural process in all of the infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And is it Anna or Anna?
Anna.
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 Okay. Thank you, Anna. And I think I captured those, but if you don't mind sending me an email or dropping that list, at least the titles of it, and in the chat, that would be fabulous. I think that there's some great pieces there as well, and certainly ties into some of the pieces that we've, the green infrastructure webinar that we had just back in September, topics of resilience, and so there's certainly some interconnecting pieces there. I want to note the time and kind of see if we can kind of wrap this up a bit and before we break down for the call. I think that there has been quite a bit of support for maybe trying to look at and think about relationship building with USDA and NEFA having to do with water resources. And so I would like to put that out on the table as something that we might want to think about as a priority for the larger group. If you all would, maybe just put into the chat a yay or a nay at this point in time, whether you think that that's something that you support as far as a priority for us to kind of work on over the next couple of years. And that can certainly be something that Stephanie and I can work with the larger leadership team on discussing for a possible action. And please note that we're definitely, if we choose to do that, I see that as something that's a specific activity. It's taking something additional on our plates. And so we will need support from some of you in order to focus on that over time. So please not only put into the chat a yay or nay for us, but also let us know if it might be something that you can and are willing to dedicate a bit of time to help us on that over the next couple of years. And then I also see, Anna had some really great ideas. There's some good topics here, and I'm kind of wondering how we might put those into actions, if you will. I think that they very much fit into things that topics that we might want to further discuss through some webinars and those sorts of things. Does anybody have ideas on how we might implement some of those types of things that Anna has brought up?
So we've got an effort in Georgia where we're working with a group called the Network for Engineering with Nature, which is the Corps of Engineers and us, but it's expanding just about every other day. I know we have Texas, Florida, Mississippi. We have groups all over the country, both in the private and public sector, joining that Network for Engineering with Nature. I think we could easily do a webinar. Our partner, they're doing a whole webinar series now and starting to have research talks on that. And there are ways where, if nothing else, our effort could help publicize some of those events to a wider audience.
That sounds great, Mark. We could definitely distribute those announcements through the listserv for sure. Okay.
Great, Karen. Well, just a little bit of a time check. We have a couple minutes left and we had one more question for everyone, but maybe I am seeing support for the USDA NEFA conversation. So maybe that's something we can pull a smaller working group together to bring some ideas back to the group.
Perfect. So Steph, should we jump to that last question?
Yeah.
So this is another poll everywhere question. This has been a topic from the leadership team, and we just wanted to kind of put it out there for you all to weigh in a little bit. Since the water resources vision has been completed, we've talked about actually not calling this the water resources visioning team any longer. And we've had a couple of suggestions, and those being Water Resources Network or the Sea Grant Water Resources Team. And we wanted to put it out to you all and see if there was something particular that resonated with the group, and kind of formalize what we call this group and as we continue to move forward. So if you could please weigh in on either of these choices, we would really appreciate it. I went ahead and put the link in the chat as well. And we'll leave this open. And as we leave this open for just another minute or two, we are drawing to the end of our time. We want to thank everybody for spending an hour with us today. Steph and I, are always trying to figure out ways to engage with you, but also keep us moving forward. So thank you very much for your time and your active attention with us today. We will have a summary of this that we'll put out within the next couple of weeks. Steph has been recording it as well, so she'll send out an email. If you know people that wanted to join us that could not, we'll probably leave these 3 different polling questions open for at least a week or so. All of that information will be contained in the email from Steph with the link to the recording. And so thank you guys again for joining us, and we'll just, Steph, did you have anything that you wanted to finish off with?
No, just thank you for your time, and thanks for joining us, and yeah, stay tuned. I think Karen already has the next calls on the calendar, but we do the all hands calls quarterly, so stay tuned for more information about that and our next webinar.
Yes, third Wednesday of each third month at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time will be our calls. So
good. Well, thanks everyone. So if you haven't voted, you can do so on your way out, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and just thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.